In today's video, I am going to be uncovering one simple but powerful tool that will help you to communicate more effectively and connect with people at a whole nother level. So, first of all, I want to welcome you to another episode of Unconscious Communication Secrets. Thank you. My name is Muneer, and today, before we get into it, I want to describe something very quickly. I want you to imagine a powerful computer, okay? So before we talk about what we're going to get into today, I want you to imagine just a very, very powerful computer. And I'm just talking about the CPU, or the actual processing part of the computer, maybe the screen, but that's it. Just that part. Now, a powerful computer on its own, without the inputs, is perhaps not as powerful as it could be. And I want you to just imagine the reason it becomes more powerful is when you add the inputs. When you have a keyboard that you can, or a mouse, or a USB drive, or something that you can input into the computer, and when you input things into this powerful computer, you can either strengthen it or weaken it, right? And that hopefully gives you a bit of an analogy of what we're going to be talking about today. So today we are speaking about the sensory, basically your representational systems, your sensory predicates, and how to understand the way that our minds actually work. So, and if you're tuning in, I'm going live. Hi, Marika. Great to see you again. Awesome. I love that you are coming on time. That's amazing. It's always such a pleasure to see you. So today, like I said, we're talking about the sensory, your representational systems, how your mind works. And this is critical because it is 100% how you think and how other people think. And so when you can understand yourself at a whole nother level, but also understand other people, you are able to communicate more effectively, whether you're speaking one-on-one, or you're speaking to a large group of audience, or you're just trying to understand how your mind processes information. And so what we're talking about today is critical. It is the foundational level. This is the base. This is the starting point. You gotta, before we get into some of the more advanced stuff, this is the foundational level. So I'll just tell you a very quick story. Like when I was actually learning NLP, there was a therapist that was telling us a story, and towards the end of the story, he was speaking to a couple, and literally he said to the couple, "I know exactly why you two are fighting so much and why you're not getting along." Now, let me rewind a little bit. How did this therapist know why this couple was fighting so much, why they were having trouble in their relationship? But so here's what happened. Essentially, he was speaking to this couple, and he was like, "Okay, what's the challenge? What's going on with you guys?" And the wife was like, "Look, this guy, he doesn't love me. He never says that he loves me. He's never telling me how awesome I am. I mean, I'm listening to my heart, and I just can't, there's nothing telling me that he is loving me, and I don't know what to do." And the therapist goes to the guy and says, "Well, so tell me what's going on from your side?" And the guy says, "Oh man, I keep trying to show her how much I love her. I buy beautiful flowers. I do all these acts of love to show her how much I care. And all I do is I visualize the amount of time we spend together, and I try and paint a picture of our love to her all the time." And then the therapist, back to the beginning of our story, the therapist says, "I know exactly why you are fighting." Now, I don't know if you noticed from the story that I told, I wonder if you noticed what was different between the two couples. What was different between the guy and the girl? Now, here's what it is. The girl, when she was speaking, and the therapist told us this, is like the lady was very auditory. She wanted to be told. She wanted to hear how much he loved her. She wanted to listen to her heart. She wanted to, be serenaded and feel like there's a soundtrack to their love. And for the guy, who was a very visual person, he was trying to show how much he loved her. He was trying to paint a picture. He was trying to get her to visualize the amount of love, and he would get beautiful flowers to show his love. And do you see, now, this might be an extreme case. However, we are all like that to a certain degree. We all have a bit of a preference for being visual or auditory or something like that. And when we don't recognize that, there can be a breakdown in communication. And it's such a simple thing. And that's why I believe that today, just from this video alone, or just from this talk alone, you could potentially just start to use something from here today and completely transform some of your communication in such a simple way. So let's go back to this. So now I want you to notice in your life, this happens very frequently. You'll notice this a lot. You could be, for example, you have 3 friends that went to the same event, and it's an event that had some great music playing, etc. And you come and you ask them, hey, you ask all 3 of them, hey, tell me about the event. And one of them will come and say, oh my God, the music, it was so amazing. I love the music. And then the other person will say, oh my God, it was crowdy. It was sweaty. Like people were bumping into me. And then the other person would say, oh, you should have seen the lights, the visual, the all the decorations they had. The scene was, the mood was like, because of the lighting, was amazing. And they've all described 3 different things, but they've done it based on what is their preference. One person may be visual, and so they're describing the visual scene. One person may be more auditory, so he's describing the music and how he felt the beat and etc. And another person was more kinesthetic, so he was describing how cold it was, how people were bumping into him, how sweaty, etc. it was. And so we see this in everyday lives. We notice it. You may talk to yourself. For example, you may be a person that either you speak to yourself, or you may tend to visualize things more when you daydream, or you might be someone that feels like bad in your body or good in your body. You feel good, etc. One of those ways of processing information may be bigger for you. So you might notice that. So in this video, I want to break down what we call representational systems and something called sensory predicates. I'll get to this in a minute. But you remember my analogy of a big computer, right? Like a computer, but a powerful computer on its own is not going to do much unless you input stuff into it. So our mind is that powerful computer, and we take in information. What information do we take in? Well, it's the stuff that we see. So it's the stuff that we see. It's the stuff that we hear. It's the stuff that we feel, like when the things that you touch, etc. It's the things that we smell or the things that we taste. I mean, we all know this, okay? So that's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. That's why it's called VAKOG, VAKOG, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, okay? Now, so we take in information via our senses into our mind. Now, the thing is, the challenge is, in any given second, there are 11 million bits of information per second that come into our brain. Our sight alone gives you 10 million bits of information. Our skin will give you 1 million bits of information. The sounds we hear is 100,000. The smells could be 100,000 bits of information, and our taste could be 1,000 bits of information per second. And The challenge is our brain cannot process all of that, or etc., or remember all of that every single second. And so especially our conscious mind cannot maintain all of that. So what we do is your mind will represent it. It will. And how does your mind represent it? It deletes different things. So for example, right now, maybe you're not thinking of how your feet feel against the floor up until I mentioned it, for example, but you weren't thinking about it. So your mind, what your mind was doing before was just deleting those bits of information because it's just not relevant at the time. How cold it is, how your heart feels, how fast you're breathing. In any given moment, you're not thinking about some of those things, obviously, up until I mention it. So your mind is deleting bits of information. It's distorting bits of information. It's generalizing bits of information. So we create in our mind a representation of what is happening in real life. It's not what has happened in real life. It is a representation. And because we have a representation, how we represent things in our mind determines how we will feel or how we will behave. Let me repeat that. How we represent something in our mind will determine how we feel and how we behave. So this is why when two people go to a sports game and they're each supporting a different team, they both see, hear, feel the same thing, but because of the way that they represent things in their mind, they will react differently based on what happens in the game. Okay? So how we represent things in our mind will determine how we feel and behave. Now, what happens is, for many of us, we have a primary representation system. What does that mean? It just means that we prefer one of the representation systems versus others. So, for example, I prefer I'm a more visual person versus an auditory person versus a kinesthetic person, etc. Right? So for many of us, we have a primary representation system. Usually it's visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Olfactory and gustatory are not so much because that's smell and taste. They're very specific for certain situations. But typically, you will be more visual. You'll be more auditory, as in you're more of a visual person, you're more of an auditory person, or you're more of a kinesthetic person. That's what we mean by saying that your primary representation system. It is your preferred way of processing information, right? You're a more visual person. So you might visualize things in your mind a bit more. When or you're a more auditory person, you may talk to yourself more, for example, or kinesthetic, you just feel things. So that's what I mean by primary representational system. Now, when you're speaking to someone, how can you determine what is a person's primary representational system? And this is where the beauty of how, when we process information in our mind, we represent our thoughts through our language, and our language gives things away. So our words indicate our preference. So we'll always have a bit of a mix. You'll always have a bit of visual, a bit of auditory, a bit of kinesthetic, but we generally will lean to one a bit more. And when we lean to one a bit more, the words that we use indicate which one is our preferred method. So for example, if someone's a bit more auditory, you might hear them say words like, phrases like, I hear what you're saying. Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I got you loud and clear. Man, that sounds difficult. They are using a lot of words that are representative of them being auditory. Just like if you're more visual, you may say, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Oh, that looks good. Yep, seems crystal clear. Oh, that looks hard. So the words indicate our preference. Now, when we use words that represent your representational system, when you use a word that represents it, we call this a sensory predicate. So Sensory predicates for auditory people are hear, sounds, loud, silence, tunes, loud and clear, rings a bell. These are all sensory predicates for auditory people. If you're visual, you'll be using words more like I see, looks, clear, view. It's all about the big picture. It's a sight for sore eyes. I want to get a bird's eye view. Those are visual ways of representing. And then if you're more kinesthetic, I just feel I'm out of touch. It's just smooth. It's rough. It's hard. It's a bumpy ride. I feel like I'm boxed in a corner. So these are ways that you will. These are ways that you see that your words represent your sensory predicate. So Marika asked a great question, which is, hold on, where's my mouse? Could you be equally auditory and visual? So there's a number of tests that you can do, and you can get a bit of a score. Generally, you'll have one that is more than the other. But how much more? It could be a little bit more. It could be a lot more than the other. So you could be a lot more visual than auditory or kinesthetic, or it could be fairly equal. But generally, like one will be a little bit more than the others, or a lot more than the others. So that's how you can determine. You can do a couple of tests and determine how are you more visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. So and so how do we apply these? How do you apply this sort of knowledge? Well, number one, when you're communicating with someone, you want to understand, what are they saying? What sensory predicates are they using? If they're talking about, oh yeah, I see, man, that's just it's just so clear to me now, and they use a lot of those visual sensory predicates, then you want to start using visual sensory predicates, and people will feel connected to you, and they won't even know why. And so it's such a simple thing. Plus, if you know that you're more auditory, for example, and a lot of the words that you're using are like, it just sounds good. I mean, it's just, yeah, I got you loud and clear. And, man, that's, it's just, doesn't sound so good, or that's music to my ears. I don't know. You use a lot of auditory phrases. As soon as you understand where you yourself are, then you might want to say, okay, maybe I need to start using other words in order to be a better communicator with all people, right? So as a speaker, this is very, very powerful. You want to be able to use visual, auditory, kinesthetic words. If you're telling a story and you want to paint a scene, and you talk about, I ran into the room and you could see all the students sitting there. You could hear them all talking, and you could just feel the AC in the room. It was cold. Just in a few words, I've gone on visual, auditory, kinesthetic, right? It makes you a better storyteller. It makes you, when you understand your visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So it is very, very powerful. Will take your communication to a whole nother level, but it will also take your understanding of yourself to a whole nother level. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It is a foundational concept that is very, 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 very powerful. I want to thank you. Yes, and thank you for it's a pleasure answering your question, Marika. It's always a pleasure to see you. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on another video very, very soon. Hey, Elliot, great to see you as well. Thanks, man. Great. I will see you guys on another video very soon. Take care. Bye for now. Bye.